In today's session, Javier Soriano and Idan Bellayev will take us through present and future of user and entity behavioral analytics in Microsoft Sentinel. Javier is a senior program manager and Idan is a program manager, both with the Microsoft Sentinel team. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to them. Javier and Idan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, great. So hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you today. I'm just going to quickly go over the agenda for our session today. Javier is going to present you with UEBA as it today. And he's going to speak about the capabilities that we have and recent features that we implemented into the product. After that, I'm going to go over a brief study case that I created for you guys. And we're going to analyze an attack by Nobelium. And I hope that from that, you'll get to see the great benefits that you can get from UEBA. After that, we're going to have a quick talk about what is going to be expected from our roadmap in UEBA, and then we'll leave time for some questions from you guys. So Javier, please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan, and hello, everyone. So yes, first of all, we wanted to do a little bit of an introduction of UEBA in general and in Sentinel. It is true that we have also covered UEBA in other webinars, so we haven't covered everything here. Like if you want more details, we have plenty of documentation on all the different tables that we have in UEBA, how to use them. Here we wanted you just to compact it a little bit, but still provide you that introduction. Let's go with that. So first of all, the definition, the generic definition from the industry on what is user entity behavior analytics. You have there the definition from Gartner, but in just more plain words, I like to see it as a way to build behavior profiles from user and entities. And those behavior profiles, what they contain is basically what the user what devices is the user accessing, what applications is he or she using, from which locations is he accessing those resources, what are the regular working hours that individual normally works on, and all those things that really form that baseline or behavior profile from the entity. And then what happens is that any activity that deviates from that baseline is raised as an anomaly and presented as suspicious for the users. And specifically in Sentinel, in Microsoft Sentinel, UEBA, we have tackled this in 4 different pillars. First of all, the detection of anomalies based on that entity profiling that we just explained. That's obviously the core of the UEBA module. But also all that contextual information and behavioral information that we gather from the environment, we want to make it available for the SOC analyst to use in their investigation and to enrich also their hunting. So they have all that information available, not only as part of the anomaly, but also as part of their usual day-to-day operation. Then we have also what we call entity pages. So these provide the analyst a clear insight and a summary of that entity in terms of what is the context of that entity. For example, if it's a VM, what is the IP address of that VM, what a specific version of the OS it is running, etc. And also a timeline of all the different events that might be affected for that host, including anomalies, including alerts, etc. And also insights on the right that you will be able to explore. And at the end, all of this, we want to make sure that you are able to benefit from very rapidly. The onboarding process is very streamlined, so you're really ready to go in a few minutes. Here's just a little bit of an explanation of how the UEBA engine works in Microsoft Sentinel. First of all, as you can see on the left, we gather all the different raw data from the different data sources that we support. And the first thing that you see right there on the left is that we perform user resolution. So basically, we take all the different identifiers from users. It can be the UPN, it can be the SAM account name, it can be the SID, the security identifier from the user. And then even if we have several from the same user, we resolve all of them to just create a single entity for that user. After that, we go into the behavior profiling itself, and we look at this in 3 layers. The first layer is the user itself, so it's the activity that the user is performing, something normal for him or her to do. Also, we look at the second layer, which is the peers. So from that individual and its peers, is that something common that is happening across that team? And at the end, we look at that behavior across the whole organization. Is that an activity or an event that is something anomalous or normal for the whole organization? After that, we enrich the data with additional context. For example, threat indicators that come from Microsoft Threat Intelligence. We also add the geolocation resolution. And then we have an additional section, which I like to spend a little bit more time on, which is the user blast radius. So basically, this defines the possible impact that a user could have in the organization if it were to be compromised, if the identity were to be compromised, right? And to calculate this user blast radius, we take into account mainly two things. First of all, the privilege or the permissions that the user has. For example, if an IT admin has a very high privilege to perform activities in the company's resources, that obviously that user will have a much higher blast radius than a user with low privileges, right? That's the first thing. We look at the privileges and permissions for that user. And also we look at the position of the user in the org chart. So the higher the position in the org chart, the higher the blast radius that is going to have. We also enrich all that information with host IP data if it's available, and at the end, the output of all this engine is the insight that you get into the different tables that we have in UEBA. Here's more of an architectural overview of the service. So on the left, you see the different customer data sources like SaaS applications and on-premise resources, and they basically send those logs into Sentinel, as you can see in the animated picture. After that data is there, we can enable the UEBA engine, as you can see in the middle of the screen. And what that enables is that we're going to synchronize the identities from our identity provider, in this case, Azure Active Directory. As you can see, the users are then moved into the UEBA engine, and then we have that profile of the user with that information coming from Azure Active Directory. Then combining that profile with the actual telemetry that came from the system, we are able to produce those anomalies that you will see in the next animation that then are hosted or are stored in our different tables in the workspace, in the log analytics workspace. Okay, after that brief overview of UEBA in general and UEBA in Microsoft Sentinel, we wanted to talk about what's new. And we're going to be talking about some features that we released in the last 6 months or so. First of all, we wanted to explain about UEBA anomalies. This is something that we released recently. These are basically low fidelity signals created by the UEBA engine. These are stored in the anomalies table. Okay, so as you saw in the previous slide, there are several tables that we have. They are fully documented in our documentation, so we encourage you to go there to understand the full details. But these in particular, the UEBA anomalies, are stored in the anomalies table. This anomalies table doesn't create alerts of incidents. Again, they are low fidelity signals, right? If you want to do so, it's very easy to do so. You can just create an analytic rules that is a schedule and that looks at the anomalies that go into that table. And how do we use those anomalies? So they're very useful to correlate with other signals, right? To, for example, build new threat detections, to also add evidence to an ongoing incident investigation, and also to hunt for malicious actors that might be ongoing in your system. We have launched this new feature with 5 new anomalies that you can see right there. Anomalous account creation, anomalous account deletion, anomalous code execution, failed logon, and sign-in activity. And you can see also on the right the different log sources that we take into account for each of those anomalies. And by the way, we are working on bringing many more of these anomalies. We have multiple of those now in preview, so we encourage you to try them on. We also wanted to speak about the watchlist templates. So these are out-of-the-box the watchlists that we provide to users. They are defined by Microsoft, so the schemas are fully documented in our documentation. And we want to create those schemas with our own definition. So we are able to do 2 things. First of all, we are able to include those watch lists in our analytic rules. We have, for example, one analytic rule that uses one of these out-of-the-box watch list. And then we also have, we also enrich with that information our UEBA anomalies. And these are going to be at the end details from your own environment that we take into account in the whole process. You can also see information about this watch list in your entity pages. So you are clearly seeing if the specific entity that you're looking at is a VIP user or is a very critical asset in your organization. And also you will see them in the investigation graph as the analyst is investigating a specific incident. Here we have the 6 different watchlist templates that we came up with. The definition, it's right there for you to explore. Basically, VIP users, terminated employees, service accounts, identity correlation, high-value assets, and also network mapping. These are the most typical use cases that we see our users utilizing. And then I want to talk about some other features that we also just released or we're about to release. First of all, identity info table. Again, this is the table that has the snapshot of all your identities in Azure Active Directory. Up to recently, there was a full sync of that table. So a full sync from Azure Active Directory to the table. I think it was every 30 days or so. Now we have reduced that sync down to 14 days. Why? We want to give the possibility to users to correlate information in Idan identity info table with other data sources. That is very important. So there's specific use cases that we have been getting from customers where they wanted to use that identity info to correlate, and now it's possible inside the analytic rules thanks to this news change. In the coming soon section, still features that are not quite there yet in public preview, but will be very soon. First of all, we have the Azure Resource Entity pages for VMs, virtual machines, Key Vault, and storage. Okay, so this would be a specific entity pages targeting these 3 different types of Azure resources. And also we have something coming up quite soon in private preview, which is an identity syncer with Active Directory. And if only available if you're using MDI, Microsoft Defender for Identity. This will give you the opportunity to upgrade your identity info table with those on-prem users that you have in Active Directory, and also improve the user resolution by matching accounts with the strong identifiers. And with that, I think I'm done with the what's new section. Idan, over to you.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you for the great explanation. I'm going to talk about the new Bellayev attack, specifically the SolarWinds attack that happened recently. So you might heard the name Nobelium, and you might heard other names like APT29 and the Dukes, Cozy Bear, the Dark Halo, and those are all associated with the same attack group and that Microsoft likes to call Nobelium. So this is the name that I'm going to use during the presentation. It's a well-resourced state-sponsored actor, and with a great extensive arsenal of tools, of tactics and techniques, which makes it a really strong actor. You might heard of the recent attack that they had and that they did, which was the SolarGate or the SolarWinds attack, where they used a supply chain breach to get to many different companies and organizations and really successfully hacked those and retrieved lots and lots of data. From what we know from different attack campaigns that we saw produced by these actors, we know that their main objectives is retrieving data. And it might be to gain some technologies from technologies institutes, or maybe to get some information from governments to gain political power. But it seems that their main purpose is to do cyber espionage to retrieve data from different organizations. And what makes this specific attack pretty special, I think, are a few things. First of all, the scale and scope of this particular attack was really impressive. They got their hands on many data from many different organizations, and it's really created a justified buzz in the cyber community. Other than that, we might have seen supply chain breaches before, but it was so successfully done that it was really hard to not notice this attack that happened in the late 2020s. On top of that, they used some kind of combination of attacks for both on-prem environments and the cloud domains. So it was really interesting, intrigued kind of combination that I will talk about during the analysis that I'm going to show you. But before jumping into more in-depth analysis, I got a video clip of some of the researchers and investigators who really took part in the investigation of this attack. They were part of FireEye and Microsoft, and I want you to hear some of their testimonies for their own experiences of investigating this attack. So let's watch it.
This entire investigation happened because a security guy at FireEye noticed that there was a sign-in event for a user using a different registered device. And they called that user and said, "Did you register a different device?" And he said no. Somebody had the intuition that something looked weird. Something looked a little bit off.
We immediately started to look deeply at the logs for anything that looked abnormal. And over the course of about 3 days, we were able to pick out just a few markers, very subtle markers, that then we looked across the environment for those markers and saw other instances.
They didn't do the same playbook at every company. And this was, one of the biggest challenges I've certainly ever had to investigate. Let's just take if you knew the Nobelian was using a particular IP address at victim A, you couldn't look for that same IP address and go look at victim B, right? They wouldn't even reuse simple things like that. If they were harvesting mail from, let's say 20 users, they would leverage 20 different IP addresses to harvest mail for different users, or access their mail or log in as them. So brittle indicators, whether it was hashes or file names or IP addresses, weren't really useful. And then we worked with various teams to help them, understand the tradecraft, and then they would then try and emulate it or look for it in different environments and access the data that they had access to.
Identity is the #1 entry and access point for the majority of all of these attacks. And if you can get a handle on identity first, then your journey towards being secure is going to be immensely faster and more efficient.
The attacks of the future, a lot of them are going to be identity based. Once I can authenticate into your environment, I don't need malware anymore. So that means that monitoring behaviors, building a profile for when Roberto's using his machine, he accesses these 25 resources and he does these kinds of things from, and he's never been in these 4 countries. If I ever see something that doesn't fit that pattern, I need to alert on it.
Okay. So I hope that you already see the connection between what those researchers say and between UEBA capabilities. And I'm going to dig deep even further into the attack to prove to you why UEBA is really the best solution to handle these kind of attacks. And by the way, everything that I present in this section of the presentation is being taken from public info. You can find everything online. At the end, the last slide of the deck, I put all the different articles that I used. There's links for all the videos. And so if you'd like to go learn more about the attack, learn more about the attack group, and so I invite you to go and use all the different resources that I used for this presentation. Talking about the profile of this specific attack. So as you heard by those investigators right now, identity was really a key in this specific attack scenario. And we know by the different analysis that has been done by many researchers that investigated those attacks, that the attackers used privileged account inside the environment to move around and eventually get to the cloud environments. once they were already in the target's network, they basically didn't use any exploits for vulnerabilities. And they actually even used, I don't know if to say basic, but like classic threat techniques like password spraying, which is pretty funny to think about because it doesn't sound that advanced. You would expect those kind of attackers to use 0 days when they're attacking such a large campaign, but they didn't. They just didn't have to do it. And they used really simple, classic kind of techniques. They were also using legitimate credentials, and the whole idea was that they posed as legitimate companies, and they really abused this trusted relationship. And so those factors made it really, really difficult to detect. Because basically they were really patient. This whole attack was taking like a year and a half. They were really careful. They did everything that they can so they won't be detected. And using legitimate credentials, using trusted relationships really helped them stay under the radar, which made it so much difficult to detect with regular tools. I mean, they didn't use any code, any malicious code during the attack when they were already in the target's environment. And so systems like EDR won't be beneficial in those cases. And so, as they said many times during the video clip, understanding the behavior of the users, understanding what normal activities are, and find those little things that make it weird, make it strange, this is what would save a company from being attacked in those attack scenarios. And I think this is exactly where UEBA comes into the picture. So just give you just a high-level breakdown of what happened in the attack. So we have 4 main phases here. The first phase talks about the initial hacking to SolarWinds. And once they were already inside SolarWinds, they used a malicious code and implemented it into the updates of SolarWinds Orion. Orion is a platform that is being used by admins and strong users in the network to just manage and control the environment. And so from that, you can figure out that this kind of platform already has strong foothold within any company that implemented it into their organization. So it was a very smart move on the side of the attackers to use this kind of supply chain, because once they got a chance to get inside the target, they already had a very, very strong place to begin with. And it actually succeeded very, very well. And they got a chance to come with the Run update and being implemented to lots of different companies. And once they did that, they managed to create a C2 channel to external C2 server and get an hand on keyboards kind of access to all the companies that they infiltrated. And again, it was very hard to detect because they used those updates from SolarWinds that were trusted, they were signed by SolarWinds, and so it was really, really difficult to understand that there's something malicious going on. Once they had this control and access to the networks, and the goal in this phase on the on-premise environment was to reach the ADFS server, which I'm going to explain a bit more about it in a second. But once they get the right privileges that they needed, their actual goal, their objective was to get lots of email, collect them, and send them to an external server and to get all the data from the victims. And so this is just I'm going to explain a bit more about the phase 3, about what happened in the on-premise side of the attack. And hopefully it will help you understand even further why I think UEBA is so crucial here. So once they had the access through the C2 channel and they had opportunity to travel within the on-prem network, they use pretty basic stuff in order to gain privileges. As you might see, they used Mimikatz to steal credentials, which is pretty funny to think about, because I remember as a security researcher myself, like 10 years ago when I was in the IDF and I was on the red team, we used Mimikatz back then to steal credentials. So it's pretty amazing to see that even after so much time, this tool still being used even by those huge actors like Nobelium. Not only that, you can see they used also LDAP enumeration, and they really did basic stuff that could help them get access to the ADFS server. Now, ADFS server is like gold for attackers. It's pretty understandable why they want to get there. ADFS is like Kerberos, but for cloud. It provides you with user authorization to access, to manage access. And so once you get there, you basically get the keys to the kingdom. And they did. They managed to get to the ADFS server, and they created a token that enabled them to basically impersonate everyone they wanted in the organization. And by doing that, it was already game over, because they were able to get to the cloud to wherever they want and get all the emails that they want to collect and send them outside of the network. By doing that, by accessing the ADFS server, basically they, again, didn't exploit any vulnerability. There's nothing like wrong, quote unquote, here. They just abuse the system to get what they want and to get higher privileges. And again, it's something that is super hard to detect. If you want to learn more about it, it is being called a SML, Golden SML, I think. Pretty similar to what Golden Ticket it is for Kerberos. And so after we understand better what the attacker was trying to do or succeeded to do, I want to break it down into TTPs using MITRE's tactics and techniques framework. And so you can see the attackers have different tactics that they perform during different phases of the attack. And I broke it down into different techniques that they use for each tactic. I'm going to show an example of how UEBA can be beneficial for one of those techniques, but you should keep in mind that what I'm going to show you can be easily changed and can be adapted to each of those techniques almost. So UEBA can really give you great value to detect most of those steps that the attackers do on the on-premise and cloud environments. So I'm going to give you an example based on how Javier has explained us that UEBA works. So first of all, we are taking the raw data. In this example, we can see that we have a 4624 event, which is a Windows on-prem security event that says that there was some kind of failed logon attempt. And basically, this is pretty much all the data that we get at this point. We have the event ID, we have the name of the server, and we have the username. What we do next is that we add lots and lots of information on top of that. We add contextual information that we can find on AD or AAD, and we will give you information like the full name of the user, the email, the blast radius, like Javier explained to us. If we have information about a public IP address, we'll be able to translate it into a geolocation. And even if we have some intel about threat intelligence and that we get by correlating the IP with information that we have in Microsoft, then we'll be able to show you also information like TI indicators. But I think what might be the most important part will be the behavioral analytics. For each entity on the event, we will provide you with information about anomalous indications that we find on this specific event. So for example, we can see it was the first time Jeff has accessed this ADFS server. We can see that none of Jeff's peers has ever accessed the server before. We might actually learn that the server is not so popular by a user accessing it directly. If we have information about geolocation, we can tell you like it was the first time that Jeff connected from China. Maybe no one else from the organization has ever connected from China before. And we can also tell you if we detect any kind of uncommon high volume of actions. And this part is really interesting because how we do it in UEBA and Sentinel is pretty special. We acknowledge the fact that each user acts differently. So we don't set like a static threshold that says, if you see 20 attempts in 1 hour, then alert me. We learn the behavior of each entity, and we'll be able to provide each user with a dynamic threshold. So each user will have a threshold of its own for what uncommon high volume is for this user. Not only that, but this threshold is being updated all the time because as human beings, our activities might change, the pattern of behaviors might change, and if we see over time any significant change in the behavior, we'll update this threshold accordingly. And it's very important because we're doing that because we know that those kind of alerts, those kind of detections can lead to false positives. And we want to give you the best detections as we can. And so it's very important to us for make it as subtle, as sensitive as possible to make sure that we can provide the right detections to different behavior patterns across the organization. Eventually, we will produce an anomaly. Anomaly is just taking all the things that I just described and put it in one box. But not only that, but we will remove information if it won't be relevant. We just want to make sure that you see the data that will help you come with a decision to what to do with this kind of indication. So we'll provide you with relevant data. We won't overflood you with information. We will provide you with evidence for why we think this event was anomalous. And also we will attach MITRE tactic and technique to each anomaly to help you understand better what happened and help you with the process of response according to the specific event and entity. And before I move on, I hope that you get a better understanding why I think that UEBA is a really game changer in this kind of attacks. And I believe that because this attack was so successful, we'll continue to see more of those in the future. Because if you think about it, by using the supply chain in such a smart way and infiltrating an organization, they basically skipped over so many steps in the kill chain. And by not using any vulnerabilities or exploit within the organization target itself, it became so much harder to detect. And as the nice people of the researcher in the clip said before, identity and behavior is probably the best way to handle those kind of situations. And so I hope you believe me now after seeing all of that. So I just want to go over some key roadmap items that we are planning to do in UEBA in the near future. So we have 3 major areas that we want to improve and do better at in UEBA. So first of all, we have the entities and event data coverage. We're doing a pretty good job with Azure and Windows events today at UEBA, and we want to be able to support more data sources and data types. So it's really important for us to spend some time on making sure that we can support third-party data sources. I know it's very important because we want to give you the best value from UEBA. So it's something that we're going to work on in the near future to provide with better results from third-party data sources. On top of that, we're doing a pretty good job with users, but we want to make sure that you'll be able to get all the data that you can see from devices as well. So we are working on integration with M365 Defender to make sure that we can retrieve all the data about devices too into Sentinel. Other than that, we also have the entity analytics that we want to do some great job at. A major project that we're working on is the entity risk score. It's very important for us because we know it will really improve the experience of using UEBA within Sentinel. By adding this score, it will allow you to not only triaging incidents in a better way because you will be more aware of the different risky users that you have in each incident, but you'll be also able to hunt entities throughout a dashboard that we'll create for you. So you won't have to start your investigation via incidents, but you'll be able to do some hunting via risky entities. We also want to incorporate anomalies in an organic way throughout the Sentinel experience. So what we're planning to do is to make sure that anomalies will be visible not only in the log analytics, but also through entity pages and the incidents themselves. So you'll be able to benefit from this great value that UEBA provides in the all existing experiences that you have throughout Sentinel. On top of that, we want to make sure that you'll be able to enjoy also investigation and response using UEBA. So another thing that we're working on is to make sure that you'll be able to run actions on top of entities. So if you are doing investigation and you already came to some kind of a decision about an entity, you'll be able to immediately use response tools to mitigate a threat on this specific entity. Also, if you're familiar with our entity pages, we're working on a very big project that we call Entity Pages Next Generation to provide you with a better experience to the entity pages, because we know that we can provide even more great value with this feature. So it's something that you're going to see in the near future as well. I will say that I really encourage you to join our private community, because we really look for partners to be with us in this journey of developing UEBA to be the best product. We're looking for feedback. We're looking to hear what you think is important. We want to know that the features that we develop will do the best job for you as clients. So please, if you get a chance to join our private community, I really recommend it, because you'll be able to take part in private previews for features that we create, and it will be, I think, a really great partnership for both sides. Before we move on to the question segment, I just wanted to say that I created some kind of a hunting query based on activities that are being associated with actions that the Nobelium group has done in the SolarWinds attack. So I put on different types of Azure activities, and you can use them to run in the behavioral analytics table that belongs to UEBA, and maybe find some interesting insights that can help you during investigation. Maybe it will lead you to start some investigations based on the findings that you'll see on top of this hunting query. And I hope that it will inspire you to create some of your own and explore the UEBA capabilities even more. So I think that we're ready to move on to the questions section right now.
Great. Our team has been great with answering the questions. We do have quite a few, so let's get through as many as we can. First one is, how long after the 4625 event comes into Sentinel does the behavioral analytics processes kick off?
Okay, so I will divide my answer to two parts. First of all, once you enable UEBA, you will start getting value right away. We'll start enriching those events, and there's ain't any delay in there. You'll start getting enrichments at the second you enable UEBA. But it takes us a week to create a good profile for users. So a week after you enable UEBA, you'll be able to see great results from our behavior profiling and get good and true positives, I hope.
Great. Next one is, are there plans to integrate with the enterprise IoT sensors data so you can see behavioral indicators from unmanaged enterprise devices?
So we are working with the IoT Defender for IoT. So we're doing some kind of collaboration with them. And I think that we're going to have some really nice information in the entity pages about it. And I hope it will get more visibility in this area as well.
Great, thank you. The next one is, how can you provide the evidence or causality using the telemetry information for a forensic process? Is it available for social threats such as cyberbullying and deepfakes?
Javier, do you have any special insights on this one?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was working on answering questions in the chat.
Yeah. How can you provide the evidence or causality using the telemetry information for a forensic process? Is it available for social threats such as cyberbullying and deepfakes?
Oof, not sure. I mean, of course, you have all the raw data that you collect in Sentinel, right, to attach as evidence. So if you, for example, have a specific event IDs that you would like to attach to that specific incident, that's doable, right? If it's an external source, there's ways, obviously, to bring that data into Sentinel. We have multiple ways, for example, using a logic app that can talk to the API from that external service and bring it into a custom log table into Sentinel. That is an option. So you can then enrich with that external data source or telemetry. So options exist. So let us know if you want more details in the chat.
Great, thank you so much. Next one is, what are current accuracy rates in terms of false positives and true positives?
That changes between customers and environments. I can maybe run some queries and I will add to the chat later some accurate answers for that.
Okay. Next one is, how often does it update the baseline profile for changing entity behavior?
All the time. It's an ongoing process. Every time that we see some kind of change in the behavior, we will update the behavioral profile.
Great. The next one is, what is the learning time for UEBA to truly be effective?
So 1 week, 7 days, which I personally think it's pretty impressive, but we certainly see that we're doing a good job after 7 days.
Thank you. The next one is, did the global admins have MFA set up and were they able to get around that?
They were able to get around that, yeah. It's actually one of the smartest things that they did, because they used the tokens, and if a user was already logged in, so they could just use it to stay authenticated, and they didn't even need to handle the MFA. They could just bypass it like that.
Great. The next one is there a detection for golden SAML?
So it's a bit tricky answer, I think, but I think the best approach to see it is that we take all the different behaviors that can lead to this kind of activity, and we will be able to illuminate it before it happens. We'll be able to see the access to the server. We'll be able to see if there's some suspicious activity on top of the server. And I hope that by finding these anomalous small indications, that we can stop it before it happens.
Great. The next one is how to detect anomalies in API behaviors. For example, earlier an API was called at a certain frequency and suddenly it is called more frequently. This can happen due to an attack to extract data from our databases and also to bring down the systems by overloading it.
Mm-hmm. So I would say that currently any data that you can get to Sentinel we'll be able to use. Currently, we support everything that you can see in Azure Activity, Azure Audit, and Azure Sign-in. So if you have any changes to API that you can see on that data sources, we'll be able to use it. But if you can give us logs specifically for API activities, and we'll be able to incorporate it into the UEBA platform, so we'll be able to produce anomalies on top of that.
Great. The next one is Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Cloud seem to have their own UEBA. What are the differences?
So each of those is doing UEBA a little differently. I think the main difference that makes us special is that we do not look for specific kind of threat patterns. We really look into different kind of behaviors, and we will look into those different types of small indications that can tell us that this behavior is anomalous. So I would say we're doing a more generic kind of detection. We won't be looking for a specific pattern. And I actually believe that it can give you a great platform to detect the things that you're not aware of, because we really want to make sure that our platform can help you with detecting what you're not expecting. So I can testify a lot for the other UEBAs, but I know that this is something that differentiate us in general from other UEBA platforms.
Great. The next one is there a way to report on the learning that has been performed to see how far along the learning journey UEBA is and to correct any errors in its learning?
So it's something that we not expose currently to users, but actually it's a great feedback and something that I think that we can work on creating.
Great. And the next one is, can you articulate on how UEBA and Sentinel cooperates with UEBA in Defender for Identity?
Javier, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think that question was more into the lines of how do we integrate with the new feature that I explained briefly, right? So the idea is that we will be able to connect to the MDI sensor, Defender for Identity sensor, to sync those identities from your on-prem Active Directory into the same identity info table, right? So that will provide you with additional identities if they are not synchronized with Azure Active Directory and with stronger identifiers, basically.
Yeah, and we're starting private preview in a few days for this specific feature. So if there's anyone who would like to test it and be a part of the development of this feature, you're more than welcome to join the private preview.
Great. The next one is, given the token reuse, does token maximum life need to be looked at more strongly, or does the problem persist?
That's a good question. I know it was a major part of the way that they discovered the attack eventually in FireEye. I'm not sure if it's something that attacker is going to reuse because it was published as one of the indicators for the attack, but it's something that is worth more exploring and researching.
Great. The next one is, would the global admin token compromise have been stopped through the use of privileged identity management?
I'm not sure actually about this one. I'm going to need to check it.
Okay. Next one is UEBA engine capable of detecting malicious actors who spread their actions over weeks? Because then the profile is also updated.
Okay, so that's a good question as well. So basically, the more stealthy the actors are going to be, it's going to be more hard for us to detect. But what we do need to keep in mind that is we don't want or we can't detect all the parts of the attacks. And what we want is just to be able to even detect small part of those. And basically, if we'll be able to detect those over time, it will help us get a better understanding of the bigger picture. But it is definitely a challenge for us.
Great, thank you. The next one is there any way to make it do a relearn of the environment? This is similar to what an IDS/IPS system can do with its DDoS baseline.
Okay, that's a good idea as well. I don't think we have this kind of option currently, but it's something that we need to look into.
Great. Let's see. How did they get the tokens that allowed them to bypass MFA?
Okay, so that was the tricky part in the attack. I actually have a hidden slide on it. I just didn't want to go too into details. But I also attached some links that explain it really, really well. There's a video actually that also really focus on this part of the attack. So I suggest to go after the session and check those out. And those are really good to understand this part.
Great. Just a few more. Are there plans to add UEBA capability for B2C scenarios?
Javier, do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question, and they asked actually a couple of times in the chat, right? So you can actually get the logs from your B2C tenants into UEBA, into Sentinel in general. It's just that the synchronization of the tenant information, so the identity info table will only contain the data from the tenant where you are, right, where Sentinel is deployed. So yeah, that would need to be a new feature where we are able to grab the information from the other B2C tenants that are connected. That's not something that we can do today.
Great, thank you. Last couple. Are there plans to integrate with the enterprise IoT sensors data so you can see behavioral indicators from unmanaged enterprise devices?
So this one, I think, goes back to the collaboration that we're going to do with Defender for IoT.
Okay. And the last one was wondering if we are getting the risky users report on security.microsoft.com. If not, where could I get the reports from the use of UEBA?
I will check specifically how to do it, and I will answer it on the chat later on.
All right. Well, thank you, Javier and Idan, for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/securityWebinarFeedback. Thank you, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.